If you're a child of immigrants, this list might make you feel called out, but it might also help you feel seen because it's not just one struggle that we have as children of immigrants. It's an everyday buildup of different experiences that some of us don't have language for. I'm Sahaj Kaur Kohli. I'm a practicing therapist who specializes in bicultural mental health. I'm the author of the book, But What Will People Say? And I'm host of the podcast, So We've Been Told. I've talked to thousands of children of immigrants. I want to share a list of 10 common struggles that every child of immigrants can probably relate to. And let me be honest, number one, we do not talk enough about. So let's get started. Let's start with number 10, constant negotiation of belonging. As a child of immigrants, you feel like you're constantly in an identity tug of war. You don't feel like you belong in either culture that you are a part of. You feel pulled between two or more cultures, and you don't feel like you belong in either. This is called bicultural identity straddling, or feeling like you are constantly adapting between different cultural systems with different values, norms, and expectations. At home, you might feel too Western for your family, and then out in the world, you might feel too ethnic for your peers. I understand this experience. Like me, you may have been raised in a collectivist household that had one set of collectivist values that you were expected to live by. And then you're out in the world being socialized in an individualistic society with diametrically opposing values. This is what creates that tension that many of us feel on a day-to-day basis. I know that over time you can find a sense of belonging and create community for yourself, but I also know that it can be exhausting and it can feel really lonely. Which brings me to number 9, having a romantic and social double life. Growing up with two sets of rules often meant living a double life, and this is such a common experience for children of immigrants. At home, dating may have been forbidden or not discussed, so you find ways to get creative. You delete your text messages, you lie about where you're going, you hide that you're in a relationship, and you might even introduce someone to your family as a friend when it's really a partner. It might be just your social life. You might have secret Instagram accounts, you might lie about sleepovers, you might hide hobbies that you fear that your family won't understand. You're always having to create a cover for your real life experiences. This double life becomes so normal in your adulthood that you still don't know how to tell your whole truth, even when you can. You have the urge to compartmentalize. You have the urge to tell white lies to make things look better than they are. And you may not introduce everyone to everyone else in your life because it feels uncomfortable. And sometimes, even with the people that you really do trust, full authenticity feels dangerous and unsafe. Let's move on to number 8. Code switching exhaustion. As a child of immigrants, it's very common to learn how to adjust your tone, your behavior, and even your literal language depending on who you're around and which cultural system you are engaging in. With your parents, you might speak one language or you might speak in a way that is indirect, that is more agreeable, that shows respect in certain ways, like not pushing back. But then at work, you might learn to be a little more assertive. You might speak in a different way. You might be more direct, more assertive. And maybe with your friends, that's where you feel like you can be the most loose, free version of yourself. This code switching means that you are a master of adapting, not because you necessarily want to, but because you feel like you have to. You're always adjusting, you're always adapting, you're always shrinking yourself depending on who you're around. And this can be because of literal cross-cultural communication struggles, right? In collectivist households, we are often raised in indirect and high context cultures. It's more based off of your body language and picking up contextual cues and who you're speaking to, and that's how you will change the way you communicate. Out in an individualist society, often that is a low context culture, which means that you are speaking in more direct ways, that you are more explicit, you are asking for what you want. And that can be very different from what you've been taught at home. This code switching can be really exhausting. I like to say that there's a code switching tax that many of us have to pay that many other people don't realize. The thing about code switching, though, is that often over time it leads you asking yourself, who am I really? Who am I? What do I want? How do I actually act? What is my personality? Because often we are constantly trying to shape those things based on other people. I want to remind you that you're not being inauthentic. You're learning to survive in systems that are expecting different things from you. You are bicultural, you are multicultural, and you are existing between different cultural systems. Have compassion for yourself. Number 7, you struggle with boundaries. I'm smiling because boundaries is the number one struggle I see in my work with my clients, with the community, with people who just send me random messages and emails. Children of immigrants really struggle with boundaries. I have a whole podcast episode on this, but this is one of of the most common struggles I see within our population. As a child of immigrants, you probably weren't taught boundaries. You probably didn't use that word growing up. Your parents didn't use that word. And if anything, now, even thinking about how Western messaging talks about boundaries feels disrespectful. It feels countercultural to what you've actually been taught. Growing up, there are ways that your boundaries might have been crossed without you even realizing it. I've heard lots of stories from people about how their diaries or journals were read, or their doors were taken off their bedroom so that they couldn't have any sense of privacy. You weren't allowed to say no to any kind of family or community event because family and community always comes first, even at the expense of yourself. So you never learned boundaries, and now you aren't even encouraged to have any. So you have no idea what it means to have boundaries in a way that respects your cultural values and feels respectful to you. So what I see happen is that now you are struggling with guilt. You feel guilt for prioritizing yourself. You feel guilt for saying no. You feel guilt for even having needs that are different than what is expected of you. So what happens is that you learn to deny these altogether. You self-abandon because you don't know how to set boundaries and you don't think that you can. And I want to be clear, this is a messaging issue, right? In one culture, you are taught to prioritize other people, sometimes at the expense of yourself. And in the other culture, you are taught to prioritize yourself, sometimes at the expense of other people. Which one are you supposed to choose? Because honestly, neither feels just right. So I know many of you are watching this and thinking, well, how do I even take care of myself? And how do I prioritize myself without disappointing everyone? We're definitely going to talk about that in another video. And I have a podcast on this, but let's keep going with the list. 6, impression management. My book is called But What Will People Say? For a reason, because that is such a common saying that many of us grew up with. We've all heard it, but what will people say, right? We've all been told to think about what other people are going to think about your choices, to consider how what you're doing reflects on your family reputation, on your parents, on your extended family, on your community, on everyone else. And we are constantly told to worry about other people's judgments, criticism, and concerns and opinions about us. Growing up, you were probably taught that reputation is everything. Aunties are always watching, uncles are always judging, that you are a reflection of your parents, and so you need to keep that in mind with every choice, behavior, and action that you make. This can be for something as little as how you dress and how you go out in the day, from the career that you have and the choices that you make with your money. And then we have the bigger struggles that I see all the time in the community. The partner you choose, whether or not you decide to have kids, things that don't really involve other people, but we are made to feel like other people should have an opinion on them. As a child of immigrants, you learn to curate different versions of yourself depending on who's watching and who might see what you're doing. Over time, though, this hyper awareness can erode your sense of self-trust. Instead of asking, what do I want? You're always asking yourself, what will other people say? I want to remind you that this is survival. This is protection. Our parents needed to be concerned about what other people were going to say because they were in survival mode. Other people's opinions actually had a direct consequence on their own livelihood, survival, safety, security, stability. So it's an intergenerational trait that is often passed down, but we can unlearn it. It brings us to number 5, guilt. Oh, the big G word. I hear this one. Second to boundaries, I hear this complaint all the time. I constantly feel guilt. I don't know what to do with my guilt. Why do I always feel so guilty? When will I ever stop feeling so guilty? This is a big one, and I know it's something that we're going to have a larger discussion about, but let me break it down for you. Many children of immigrants experience what I call chronic guilt. They constantly, always feel guilt for everything. If they are out with their friends, they feel guilty for not being at home or not calling their parents back. If they leave work at a decent time, they feel bad for not staying to work. If they take a nap, they feel bad that they're not being useful or doing something productive. Guilt is just a chronic experience so many of you, me included, feel on a day-to-day basis. Guilt for not calling enough, guilt for not being enough, guilt for not being grateful enough, guilt for having different needs, guilt for wanting something different, guilt for falling in love with a partner that maybe your parents wouldn't choose for you, guilt about literally everything. I've heard it all. One of the most common sources of guilt I hear is what I call thriver's guilt, a guilt for having more access to opportunities, resources, options than your parents and extended family have. There's a guilt for even being able to thrive, being able to have ease, being able to have a sense of privilege. You silence yourself by even thinking, how can I complain when other people have it worse? My parents and my grandparents have lived through unimaginable trauma. There are people across the world who are starving and being killed. How can I even think about complaining? It is not a zero-sum game. Pain and suffering are not a competition, and self-gaslighting doesn't help anyone. Instead, it actually just hurts you even more. Existentially, this guilt often grows into loyalty conflicts, wanting something different than your parents want for you, having to fight for what it is that makes you happy. You feel torn between living the life you want and living the life that your parents know will get you a sense of security and safety, even at the expense of your own happiness. Every single decision feels like a betrayal, and I understand how painful that can be. If you choose your family, you feel like you're abandoning yourself. And so many immigrant kids end up somewhere in the middle. Not because you're indecisive, but because loyalty feels like a zero-sum game. And I want to remind you, it's not. Number 4, toxic productivity. You weren't just encouraged to succeed as a child of immigrants. You were expected to. You were expected to be the top of your class, to get a stable job, to make a certain amount of money, to give back financially to your parents, to show up a certain way, to have a certain kind of lifestyle that shows a certain type of status, and honestly, to make your parents' sacrifices and choices worth it. You are your parents' wildest dream. You are their American dream. So rest isn't modeled. You don't know how to slow down. You don't know how to feel joy. You don't know how to play for the sake of playing without it being performative or evaluative in some way. Slowing down is something that you really struggle with. You've learned to tie your own sense of self, your value to doing, to giving, to producing, not simply existing. And when you do succeed, many of you watching this are probably wildly successful children of immigrants who have worked really hard, who have had high standards for themselves, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But when you do succeed, what I notice when it comes to toxic productivity is that you can't celebrate it. You don't know how to say, wow, I achieved that. You don't know how to relish in the milestone, to slow down and say, when does this become enough? Instead, you're always chasing the next thing. Your milestones are always moving. The goalposts are always moving. Success and achievement and praise become a love language that you are constantly trying to chase. And you learned from your parents and probably intergenerationally that success and achievement are your ticket to safety, to belonging, to acceptance. And depending on how your parents raised you, might have been your ticket to love and to being loved. So you might have internalized the belief that if you stop producing and achieving, you might actually be unlovable. And that is a really hard and heavy burden to carry. Number 3, emotional suppression. Growing up, you weren't taught or modeled how to express your emotions. Maybe when you cried, you were told to stop. Maybe when you got angry, you were told that you were being ungrateful and that you should be put in your place. Anger might have been only a privilege for men in your family or your elders. Maybe when you had a bad day, you were told to stop complaining or whining, that other people have it worse. You've never used emotion language in your household because it wasn't something that your parents probably learned. You watched your parents have to toughen up, and that's why they expect you to do the same thing. They had to literally survive, and they probably survived unimaginable traumas, discrimination, immigration experiences, survival, poverty, abuse, whatever it is that they experienced, they had to toughen up literally in order to make it to the next stage. So over time, you learned feelings can wait and feelings should wait. Maybe they're a waste of time. Maybe they're not worth it. Maybe they'll just go away if we pretend they don't exist. So now, as an adult, you struggle to access your emotions. I've heard from many children of immigrants who say that they feel numb emotionally. They don't know how to tap into those parts of themselves. I work with a lot of clients who feel like they don't know how to express their emotions because they don't even know how to identify them. They were never taught how to understand what sadness feels like in their body, what it means to be angry, what it means to even feel pleasure. What I think people don't realize is that when you numb or you avoid those quote unquote negative emotions, you are also keeping yourself from the pleasurable, enjoyable, amazing emotions that we all deserve as well. It is not that you can have one over the other. When you deny some, you are denying most of your access to that emotional depth. So if you feel emotions as an adult, like me, you might feel like you're too much, you're too sensitive, you're too needy. Why are your emotions so big? You become so good at keeping it together and pretending these emotions don't exist. But here's the thing, you're not necessarily in survival anymore, and you deserve to take your parents' momentum and take it to the next level of emotional self-actualization. Number 2, a really common one, parentification burnout. I wrote an entire essay on this for the Psychotherapy Networker because I learned through research that while anyone from any background can be parentified as a child, in immigrant families, children are more likely to be parentified. What that means is that as a child, you took on adult like roles. This might be instrumental, like translating, helping take care of your younger siblings, doing things around the house, getting a job, and financially contributing to the survival of the household. Or it could be emotional, where you were your parents' confidant, where you mediated family conflict, where you were the person who held all the emotional burdens for the people in your family, the secret keeper. Both and either of these parentifications can have a long-term consequence on your own sense of self. You learned essentially to be the good immigrant kid at the expense of understanding yourself and being a kid altogether. Many children of immigrants I work with lost a childhood to parentification. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't feel pride or understand or have empathy or compassion for why they were parentified, but oftentimes what was taken was being able to be the age you were when you were a kid. Instead, you might have been praised for being mature for your age, for being an old soul, because you were taught to be older than you developmentally were. So now, as an adult, you're exhausted, but you also learned to be a people pleaser. You've learned perfectionist tendencies, if not struggling with perfectionism altogether. You feel like your usefulness is tied to your value as a person, what you can give to other people, what you can help other people with, how you can make other people's lives easier. And this is something that I see across the board, but also really often with eldest daughters and daughters of immigrants. And now for number one of the most common experiences and struggles I see children of immigrants have. It is something we do not talk enough about, and a lot of people don't have language for: grief. I'm not talking about losing a family member or going to a funeral or tangibly missing or losing out on something or grieving something. I'm talking about a sense of a disenfranchised grief, or a grief that is not totally understood, that is not totally clear, that doesn't have a lot of language for it, but it's this experience, this internal experience that I know almost all, if not all, children of immigrants experience to some degree. You grieve a lost oral history. Many children of immigrants don't have access to certain elders, so you grieve entire relationships and histories that you may never have access to as a child of immigrants. You grieve losing your mother tongue. Maybe you're someone who can understand it fully, is a receptive bilingual, where maybe you understand the language, like me, completely, but you don't really speak it. So then you're losing access to communicating with certain elders or being able to feel fully culturally enough because of that loss of language. Maybe there are actual lands that don't exist anymore where your families grew up because of war and colonization and natural disasters. This is a sense of grief that is so intangible but so real and heavy that so many children of immigrants feel. You might grieve as a child of immigrants the years your internalized racism or shame took from you, the years in which you wanted to be white, the years in which you were ashamed of who you come from and where you come from. This is, again, not a tangible grief, but a grief nonetheless. You might grieve what was never yours, but something that you still feel internally: your parents' losses, the trauma that your extended family and your elders have carried, the weight of what war, imperialism, and colonialism have taken from you and your family. You've even watched your parents' grief, and you've absorbed it in some ways, even if you don't think you have. And now you grieve watching them age. You have a sense of anticipatory grief of what is going to be taken from you because you already feel the heaviness of what already has been taken from you. These griefs are quiet. They don't come with rituals. They don't come with like a guidebook of how to deal with them. And oftentimes these griefs are invisible. So many of us haven't had language for it, and so many of us struggle to be able to find other people who can relate. You might ask yourself randomly, why am I so sad? Sometimes it's pinpointed to the very things you didn't know that you've lost. While there are so many other struggles that children of immigrants experience, I really do think these are a top 10 that I have seen in my work as a therapist, a community builder, and a podcast host. These struggles are heavy, but you really don't have to deal with them alone, and I promise you that you are not alone in experiencing any of them. No person's experience is identical to someone else's, and I hope you feel less alone in knowing that there are people out there who struggle with what you struggle with. Naming them, having language, that's the first step in being able to know how to heal. I hope this video was helpful. Please subscribe to my channel. Please follow me on Brown Girl Therapy on Instagram. I'm really excited to be making more videos for children of immigrants and the bicultural experience.